All right, beautiful. So, show starts in 3, 2, 1. Well, good morning, Dr. Green.
It's a pleasure.
I'm Jesus Flores, also known as J Flo. This is the 15th episode of the Drippy Faucet podcast. I'm really excited to be here, guys. This is an amazing person that I have on the show, especially for teachers, right? But more than just teaching, even if you're a normal individual who has a different type of job, I'm pretty sure that there's going to be something from this conversation that you're going to be able to borrow from, take in your own life, and utilize it. So let's start a little bit with your history. Where are you from?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Jesus, for having me on your podcast. And I did not know it was called the Drippy Faucet podcast. I might have had second thoughts if I had known it was called the Drippy Faucet. Or I might have thought, you know, you got the right guy on your show today, because I can be a pretty drippy faucet myself. So when it comes to history, I think, you know, I can roll on a lot of subjects, and history is one of my passions. And so would you like the history of Dr. Green? Is that what you were after?
I would like to hear a little bit about your story, as far as like, what did you go through in your childhood that led you to become the man that you are today?
Oh, very good. I think when I look back on my childhood, I see an absent childhood. We had some events in our life that were very dramatic, involved a lot of suffering, and therefore for me, I think I lost my childhood somewhere in the range of 7, 8, 9 years old, when due to the circumstances in our life, I really had to grow up pretty quickly. So that being said, we were born down at LA County General Hospital, down on the highway there to East LA, and I spent a lot of my childhood over in El Sereno and down off of Collis Avenue and Monterey Road. We grew up in Highland Park, is where we finally settled in Northeast Los Angeles, and it was a rough go from the beginning. My mother and dad were sweethearts prior to World War II, when he was called to serve in the European theater fighting Adolf Hitler. And if you ever saw the movie Saving Private Ryan, my dad came in on the second wave of D-Day. He was a communications expert. He went up through France into Ypres, Belgium, where he picked a poppy from Flanders Field, very famous battle site in World War I, and he wrote the poem, in Flanders Field the poppies grow beneath the crosses row on row. And he put that poppy and that poem in an envelope, said to my mother, "Will you marry me or not?" And she said, "You come home alive and I'll marry you." And my father came home on Christmas Eve from London to New York in 1945. He came home on board the Queen Mary to marry his queen.
Wow.
And so Mom and Dad did their best to contribute to the baby boom. My generation is the largest population increase in U.S. history, because the men came home from World War II and there were no television sets.
There was only one form of entertainment.
There was only one thing to do, and that was, let's get at it. And so they did, and a lot of practice, but no babies. And so they adopted, and my oldest brother, my big brother, was this tall. They found out after a few months that he had achondrophagia, a form of dwarfism. And so that was a hardship, of course. But as often happens, couples adopt, and no sooner had they adopted my big brother that my mom got pregnant with the most beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed bundle of joy to ever grace the planet. And I'm speaking of myself, of course. A year later, another boy, my brother Scott. A year, 10 months after, that's kind of scary thought. my youngest brother Jay. So 0 to 4 boys in under 4 years' time. At that time, my dad loved to work in the yard, like this beautiful setting. That's where I got that from. And he was out in the yard one day and came in complaining of some chest pains. He had a massive heart attack, and he died there when I was at our home when I was 3 years old. So we lost our dad. My mother had at that time what was called a nervous breakdown. She was institutionalized. During that time, we lived with our grandparents. 6 months later, my grandfather passed away, and a year after that, my grandmother passed away. And so my mom lost her husband and her dad and her mother in less than 2 years' time. We kind of floundered. We were a floundering family, just not knowing up from down and right from wrong, and it was a difficult upbringing. My mom's sister came to live with us, and what ended my childhood truly was when I was 9 years old. We were hit, we were in a horrific car accident, and that car accident was so horrific. My mother was in the hospital for over a year with 11 broken bones. Her sister, who was in the car accident, was killed. My 2 brothers, my oldest and youngest, went through the windshield of the car. Their faces were so badly scarred after that, they both survived. But if they were to show up here in this interview, before you'd notice their gender or their race or the color of their eyes or hair, you would notice the horrible scars on their face. I was fortunate. I was in the back seat, and I was the only one conscious in the car. And on the way to the hospital, my living brother Scott had a compound fracture to his leg. The fireman said, "Is it okay if I put his leg on your lap?" And he put his leg up on my lap, and he said, and the fireman said, "Where's your father?" And I said, "Oh, my father died when I was 3. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, I guess you're the man of the family now." And that was kind of the end of my childhood after that. I was a very serious young child. I was very hardworking. I was gifted in sports. And so in my growing up years, the thing that was my salvation, the thing that kept me on the straight and narrow through my teenage years was football and baseball. And I had a passion for football. I was the captain of the football team and the quarterback. I had a passion for baseball. I was a first baseman and a big left-handed pitcher, and I loved pitching. And I was the captain of the baseball team.
What team? What high school did you go to?
Oh man, I was a Franklin Panther.
Hey, Franklin, baby.
Yeah, you bet, man. There is a funny story there, though, and that was
Sure.
when I was in high school. I couldn't believe that I was a part of a winning team. That meant so much to me, to be a part of a winning team. And it was very common for the captain of the football and baseball team on the bus ride home from a game to sit in the bus just sobbing. And everybody thought, what's wrong with this guy? And what was wrong with me was I could not believe that I was a winner. And so I won the wonderful nickname in high school, Güero Chillón. For those non-Spanish speakers, kind of the blonde crybaby.
That's funny. That's funny. Did you have long hair in high school?
Well, during baseball season, because during football season we had to shave our heads. I looked much like I do today without the goatee.
What was that all about? What was that whole like shaving your head thing about? Was it just like a cultural thing?
Team camaraderie.
Yeah. So everybody had to do it.
Every player on the team shaved their head to be a Franklin Panther football player. And it paid off. Yeah. Every year I played there, we were undefeated.
Wow. That is such a cool thing. Such a cool thing. Do you still hang out with some of those guys? Like, do you know anyone by any chance? Because it's been a long time.
I do know some. In fact, I was at an event. If you live long enough, you're going to run into
The same people.
old friends, right?
Right.
And so I was at a retirement party for a friend's mom the other day, and I ran into a Franklin High Panther football player, and he gave me the lowdown on how everybody's doing, and it was just wonderful to hear the stories of my teammates and where they're at today and what they're doing today.
Definitely.
I have not kept in touch as much with regard to let me do life with you, simply because of my life experiences to that point. I was not the happiest guy in the world. You would think with all the good things happening to me that I would have been happier, but it was very common. In fact, if you read my yearbook where everybody signs, in the yearbook, a lot of people said to the guy I've never seen smile.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was not the happiest kid, and I think it's because my entire growing up years I was living this double life, this life of great success on the sports field and then great tragedy at home. After that car accident, my oldest and youngest brothers really struggled, and much of it, I believe, was due to that scarring on their faces and the trauma of going through the front windshield. We did not know it at the time. There was no special education classes per se at the time. We're talking prior to the 1970s, and you could imagine a school, to all your teacher friends, getting one of the green boys in your classroom would have been a big chore. We were not the happiest kids to have in your classroom. We were very needy.
Right.
And you could imagine one every year coming through your class for
Well,
4
oh boy,
years.
another one.
No, you're looking at the roll sheet every year going, oh, not another green boy.
Right.
And so it was a pretty tough assignment,
So
for sure.
would you say that your upbringing, the trauma that you experienced, having to become a man earlier than you should have, did that lead you to want to become a teacher?
I did not feel a calling to be a teacher. I felt a calling. This is odd. Before the term social justice became prevalent, I had a full academic scholarship to Occidental College. That's because they didn't give athletic scholarships, and so I went there to play football and baseball. By the way, I'm a little older than Barack Obama, and he was not there when I went there. But my brother swears that we did play in a pickup basketball game with him at Occidental.
Really?
Yeah. So at Oxy, I played quarterback my freshman year. I started 4 games, did really well. My spring season, I played baseball, started at first base and pitched and did very well. But something happened to me halfway through that baseball season that completely changed the direction of my life. And I mentioned I was into social justice. I was a sociology major, and I really wanted to go into law. In fact, I guess my dream was to become a judge. That's what I thought, And for somebody like me, who was just the most straight and narrow, boring man on earth, I was a workaholic from the age of 9. And for someone like me, that might have been a really good occupation for someone like me. But that spring of 1973, I had an encounter with the faith journey of my life began when I was 19 years old, and it was an Athletes in Action Bible study that a senior All-American on the football team invited me to come to this Bible study. And I'll never forget, we went, the guy that did it, he wasn't very good at talking, he wasn't a very good presenter, But everybody, all the football players, they made fun of him. They were throwing stuff at him and stuff. Nobody was listening. But I sat there and listened. And for the first time in my life, I just felt like I was hearing all of truth that there was. And you know from being my student that I have honored you from the day I met you. And the reason why somebody had the good foresight to name this young man Jesus, or in English, Jesus. And he will tell you that from the first day in my class, I just honored him because I felt like Jesus had walked into my class. And that's because at 19, I had an encounter with the living Christ, and it changed my life forever. The only way I can describe it is the course of my life changed from this lost pursuit into darkness, where I had no clue what I was doing or where I was going, to this amazing journey into the light, where things became very clear to me where I was going and what I was doing. And there's a scripture that says, anyone who sets their hand to the plow and looks back is not worthy of the kingdom of God. And when I was 19, I set my hand to the plow, and now, I know you can't believe this out there, I'm 65 years old, just turned 65. I know, hard to believe, huh? But I have had my hand to the plow of the kingdom all these years, since 19. And I was a different man. It changed the trajectory of my life, and suddenly, my wife says I never answer questions, so let me answer your question. How did I become a teacher? I didn't choose it. I did not choose it. I graduated from Occidental College and I needed a job. And so the first available thing I thought was, hey, it was hard to pay for Occidental College. It was so expensive. And after I lost my athletic scholarship, when I quit my academic scholarship, when I quit the sports team, I had to work and find a way to pay my way through school. Well, when I graduated, I wanted a cheaper school. So I went to Cal State LA. Yeah, that's a good school right there. Because at that time, you could take all the units you wanted for $125. And I did. I took 30, 35 units a quarter, because it was only $125 and I could afford it. So I took general ed classes. It was the very beginning of special education. Public Law 94-142 had just passed, and now all of a sudden there was free and appropriate public education for those with disabilities. It was a brand new bludgeoning field. It was growing and growing, and I thought, man, I could get a job in this. So I got my credentials in special ed. Back in the day, you had to get a general credential before you got that special ed credential. So I got a generalist and then a special ed credential. They had a program where you could get your administrative credential, and I got that, and then you could get your master's degree. So I got a master's in special education. All that in 2 years.
Wow. Now it's like 2 years to get your preliminary, and then another 2 years to clear it.
Oh,
and
anybody that's becoming a teacher today, I so feel for you, because we never had to jump through the hoops that you jump through today. It's very, very difficult to be a teacher
it's
today.
so ridiculous, and it's it makes me wonder whether they want us to be teachers or not.
Well, Jesus, the one response I have to that, as you know, as a professor who teaches teachers how to be teachers,
Yes.
My one response is, first of all, my job as a professor is so easy. And the reason why is because to be a teacher today, you have to be the best of the best of the best. It's like nobody defaults into a teacher job today. You have to be the cream of the crop, the best of the best. We only take the best teachers today. And so all that idea of teaching is for those who can't make it anywhere else or something, this is true. Baloney.
Oh, no.
The best become teachers. Lee Iacocca once said, here's a bumper sticker for you, in a truly rational world, the best of the best would teach, and everyone else would have to settle for something less. And it really is true. I think as we begin to get into the worldview that has been shaped in me for education, I think you're going to find in those deep waters. I think what you're going to find is really it's those who are called to teaching that are the glue that really hold our civilization together. There's no place left in our culture like the public school. And I think, I'm a big believer in public schools, and I'm a big believer, especially in the local elementary school. Mm-hmm. You tell me one other place in our culture today where there is a sense of community. Tell me one other place in our culture today where everybody turns out for an open house, a back to school night, right? Like the local elementary school. Generations come, multi-ethnic come, rich and poor come. Everybody shows up at that local elementary school for back to school night. You know why? Because deep inside, we all still believe that our greatest hope for a future is education and the next generation, right? Yeah. And
so what happens along the way? What happens along the way from elementary to middle school to high school that everyone becomes so detached in that sense of community and that sense of hope in education?
Yeah. Well, I think that we look around, don't we? And we are all researchers in life. We're all on a journey to learn what is this world all about? What is my place in the world? What on earth am I here for? What is my plan? What is my purpose in my life? I think everybody wants to know. And if you took it in the most sterile, secular terms, isn't everybody on a life journey to find out what their identity is? Isn't that really what we want to know? Is who am I and what is my purpose?
Yeah.
Remember, little plug for one of my favorite movies. Mm-hmm. How about Forrest Gump? When his mother's passing away, and he comes in and Mama says she's dying, and he says, "Why are you dying, Mama?" And she says, "I guess it's just my time." And she starts to talk about, "I was so glad to be your mama, that I could help you on your journey to find your purpose." You remember Forrest Gump gets choked up and he says, "What's my purpose, Mama?" And I think that's the longing of the human heart. We just want to know, what is my purpose? And I think when we lose our way in the journey to find our purpose in life, that's when we become disillusioned, disenfranchised. That's when I'll broach the subject now. I wrote my doctoral thesis, my dissertation.
Yeah, tell us the thesis of it.
Yeah, I wrote my dissertation on the attribute, the character trait, the identity formation of compassion. And so, as you know, when we talked about doing your podcast, I said, boy, it's kind of hard to fit everything I've learned, not just in my life journey, but in 7 years of doctoral study and beyond. It's kind of hard to fit that in a little half-hour or 1 hour episode. Right. So, I hope I'm a hit so that you'll invite me back.
Dr. Green will be back.
I hope at some time you'll invite me back so I could tell more of this story.
Sure. I would definitely love to hear part of the argument and the evidence, and obviously we don't have enough time to discuss all of it, but a part of it, right?
Sure.
And then later on, more parts and different stories and things like that.
Yeah, so we can at least broach the subject today, right, of my dissertation. So, I mentioned I lived a double life. And so I got through college and met the girl of my dreams, my queen, and just fell head over heels in love with my little Linny. Just loved that girl. She was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen in my life. And so after college, if I wanted to marry her, I needed a job. And so was my call to teaching, is I need a job.
Right.
And by the way, here's a good bumper sticker for you. I don't think it's ever wrong to be a teacher because you need a job. I think if I asked you 10 years into teaching, why are you a teacher, and your answer was still because I need a job, that would be wrong. Because ultimately, I think what we find out is teaching is one of the greatest callings on life. If you ever want to know, what am I here for? What is the purpose of my life? What makes life meaningful? If you ever want to find your identity, I think teaching is one of those jobs where you truly can find your identity in it. When you become a teacher and a few years into it, you realize when you're talking to a student, just like I'm talking to you right now, because Jesus was my student. He met me in my class.
Facts. Los Angeles County of Education.
I was his teacher, his professor, and he met me in class. And when he called and asked me to do this podcast, I think that was his moment that a teacher has with every student. Every student will at some point sit down and look in your eyes like this, like we're looking in each other's eyes. And that student, you'll see that they'll ask you a question, and you'll see that the answer to this question is not just going in their ears, it's not just getting comprehended in their eyes. The answer to this question is going somewhere really deep. In fact, I think every teacher's had this experience where a child will come up and say something to you, ask you for some guidance, an opinion, a direction, and you realize that the next thing you say is going somewhere really deep. I think in a spiritual journey we might call that somewhere the soul. I think in more secular terms, if you don't have a spiritual journey, you might call that deep into my heart or deep into my identity. It's going somewhere where it's going to shape who you are. I think all of us can think back on our lives and remember something someone said that shaped who we are. And words are powerful like that, and so I became a teacher because I needed a job and because I wanted to get married and because I wanted to have this. I wanted to have a home. And I'm so glad Jesus could come to my home today. And I'm so glad he feels at home. Look at him. He feels like a member of my family. And that's how I wanted it to be. I wanted to have children of my own. I wanted to have a life that I never knew. I wanted to have a life where there wasn't so much tragedy and there wasn't so much suffering. And when I became a teacher, I wanted to give the vision of that to my students, that they could long for a better life also, and they could find that better life. And the common denominator in all that was, you can't go into public schools today and proselytize. It would be wrong to go in and promote one worldview over another. That's not what public school is about. Right. Public school is where we get exposed to all kinds of worldviews, all kinds of ways of life. Diversity is a beautiful thing.
It sure is.
Isn't it?
Yeah, when I was a little kid, and I grew up in Huntington Park, so every time I came out, all I would see was like Latinos and just Mexicans, and in my head I would be like, well, obviously I like it,
yeah,
but at the same time I wanted to see Indian people, right? I wanted to see Chinese people. I wanted to see every different sort of ethnicity, and I never got to get that experience, right? But it was something that my heart longed
You never
for.
had a Huero Chion?
No, there wasn't white people in HP. Oh, actually, somewhere along the way, I lived in Alamo Street, 61st Street, and I had one white neighbor.
Oh my!
She was a nice white lady.
Oh, good.
Super nice. She was always sweet to me. She actually went to Huntington Park, and she would just give me all these different stories.
She wasn't the white lady of Elysian Park, was she?
I don't know.
Oh no, that's scary.
I'm not sure.
Oh no.
But back to like the thesis, right? Of compassion.
Did I go on a bird walk there? That we're gonna roll back.
No, but you know what? Podcasts allow you to converse freely, right? Like this is not a lecture. This is not a PowerPoint. This is not a XYZ. You got your information. Good day. It's really just you and I sharing the conversation about meaningful things, and that's exactly what I'm feeling right now. That's exactly how it's going. But as the host, it is important for me to redirect, right?
Okay, all right.
Wherever I want it to
You're going to
go.
rein me in now.
Exactly. So
before you do, and I do this all the time. Before you do, because I like humor. I like humor because if all you here, and you heard him ask me for a bumper sticker, so
yeah.
I got to pause to say, here's a good one.
Sure.
if all you ever study in your life is suffering, you've missed half of life's journey. Because life is not about suffering. Life is about joy. And if we don't have joy in our life, even in the midst of suffering, then we've really missed half of what living is all about. And so I love to be joyful. And so I'm just going to say, this podcast thing, this works for me, brother, because if it was my wife sitting here interviewing me, she would have already told me, stop talking. That's my poor wife. I talk so much. The other day I was driving in the car, and my 5-year-old granddaughter was in the back seat. And I was talking away to her. We were driving down the road, and she said, finally my granddaughter says to Zoe, she says to me, Papa, who are you talking to? So you're going to find, I like to talk.
Yeah.
So steer me back to my dissertation now.
Definitely, right?
And you want to know, so what happened?
I want to know why it is that you came to argue that as your thesis.
Yeah, very good. I didn't start out that way. Just like I didn't start out to be a teacher. I needed a job, and I was getting married, and I became a teacher right after I got married. So my wife and I have been married now 43 years, and I've been a teacher 43 years.
Wow, that's
right?
special.
Isn't that something?
For sure.
So it's been a long journey, right? And so as a teacher, you begin to see, this is not a job. This is something really powerful. The relationship between a student and a teacher is a very, very powerful thing. In fact, there's some cautions about not many should be teachers. You know, it is a calling.
I truly believe that. I truly believe that not everyone has the talent, the willpower, the skills, and the heart to be a teacher. Yeah. And it's kind of evident sometimes. But at the same time, I try not to be too judgmental of people because maybe they're not there yet.
Yes.
Right? Like maybe
I sure wasn't.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And so certainly everybody could try to be a teacher, and everybody could, but I will say this. In my field of study, special education, we need everyone. There's a place for everyone in special education.
I see what you're saying.
I'm telling you, it's true that the needs are so great. The needs are so great. And you know, today, we could broach some very sad subjects today. Something called the school to prison pipeline.
It's real.
Why is it that 70% of youth incarceration, those kids have special needs, learning disabilities? The rate of illiteracy among hard timers, lifers, is horrific. Listen, reading is one of the greatest gifts you can give a child. You want to give a child a future, you give a child the ability to read. In fact, here's a bumper sticker for you, and it's a real bumper sticker. If you can read this bumper sticker, thank a teacher.
Ooh, that's a good one right there. I like it.
If you can read this bumper sticker, thank a teacher.
Wow.
Why? Because reading is the key to unlock the door of learning. And reading can give you a life. If you can become a self-learner, you look at all the greatest people in history, they were self-learners. We think today, I didn't have any college, so I'm not going to be a success. Well, college is a good thing, but you know what? Abraham Lincoln didn't have no college. Abraham Lincoln didn't have no high school, junior high. I think he had 1-2 years of formal education. Self-taught. Hey, you want to be a success like Abraham Lincoln?
Learn how to read.
Read the books he read. Read the books that he would read to become the man that he was, to form his identity. Yeah. Reading shapes your identity.
Right.
And so what you read is important because it's an identity shaping practice.
Right.
And by the way, for those that struggle with reading out there, I'll just tell you something. So did I. I think I went to college illiterate.
Really?
I did. That guy that took me to that Bible study, he also taught me how to read. He taught me how to outline chapters and how to write a paper. And by the time I graduated, I was on the dean's list at Occidental College. I went from almost flunking out to being on the dean's list at Occidental College. When I went to Cal State LA, I had learned to be a student, and I said, this is going to be my calling from now on in life. I'm going to be an, rather than athletic, I'm going to be an academician, whatever that means. And I did, and I graduated with high honors from Cal State. I got straight A's there in everything I did. So, and then on to my doctorate, which you're asking me about, which was, how did I finally fall into this study of compassion? I didn't start out that way. I was suffering badly. In 1995, I had great depression. The world seemed like a very dark, depressing place. In 1995, I was struggling with the loss of my youngest brother. My youngest brother, who went through the windshield of the car, his scalp was peeled back off his head, and he had a horseshoe-shaped scar. Literally, it looked like a horse kicked him in the forehead. And if he walked in a room, before you would see the color of his hair, you saw that pronounced scar on his forehead. And that scar really shaped his personality and the way he interacted socially. It caused him to become isolated, helpless, hopeless, which is the combination that leads to demoralization. Demoralization simply means your life loses its value. I believe that he and my oldest brother both had what we would call today in special ed traumatic brain injury. And what that means is your brain is so fragile, it's about the consistency of room temperature butter. And if you shake that butter too much, all those neurological connections, they're going to get shaken loose. What have we learned today about concussions in football? By the way, I've had a few.
I have had one.
Good thing you're interviewing me right now,
maybe I forgot.
Because in the next few years, I don't know.
You're still going to be?
No, who are you again? And then
I was in your house.
And then it'll become, who am I again?
Right.
Is our time up?
No, we're good.
We got a little time?
We're still good.
I hope the audience is still there when you put this out there.
Well, you know what? I know for a fact that those who are prepared to listen will be there.
So let's rein me in again and get back to this important story.
Okay, so let's kind of like redirect it a little bit to a different place.
But can I say one word to some out there?
Please do.
My oldest brother, my big brother, was a dwarf. The gangs liked him as a mascot. And not only did he go through the windshield and have 185 stitches on his face, if you looked at him, before you realized he was a dwarf, you would notice that his lip was missing and his nose was cut off. And they took skin and grafted it and formed a new lip and a new nose for him. His face was so badly scarred, if you saw him, that was the first thing you'd see. Imagine going through public schools with those kind of disabilities. Imagine that. Imagine that.
I can't even. Like, I consider myself a very empathetic person. Like, I can step into people's shoes, but I can't do that.
Yeah. If he needed to belong or to be loved, if he needed to be accepted, if he needed all of the human needs we all have to be a part of something, a family, and he came from such brokenness as we came from, where do you think he's going to end up?
Jail.
Yeah, and in the gangs, right?
Yeah.
And my big brother, Little Güero, he ended up in one of the most notorious gangs in Los Angeles.
What gang?
It was the Avenues gang. Little Güero, Los Avenidos. I'm not saying that to say gangs necessarily are wrong. I'm saying that because gangs do provide something for people like my brother. They provide la familia para mi hermano, see? And I'll tell you the one thing that was bad though is gangs practice something called jumping in, don't they? And when you become a gang member, to get in this family, you're going to be indoctrinated. You're going to be initiated into this gang in a very violent way. When someone jumps in a gang, they get the crap beat out of them. And I'm talking punching the head, kicking the head, hitting with clubs. And that happened to my brother as well. He already had traumatic brain injury. What do you think that did to his butter? You see, because football players, boxers, we all end up the same way. We end up with all the connections in our brain broken.
Missing.
You see? And a big part of that school to prison pipeline has to do with, listen, you have to protect the one and only brain you've been given. You have to, listen, who said it? I think the NAACP said this about black people and going on to higher education. What did they say? A mind is a terrible thing to waste. If this podcast does nothing else but create a less violent culture among the gangs, so be it. Because that practice means no future for the ones that have traumatic brain injury. And so as a special educator, that would be an area of concern for me where I just say, it's not that there's no hope, because we know a lot now about the brain and about neural pathways and about how to reconnect neural pathways. But I'm telling you, that's a long, difficult journey to do that. My big brother never got those neural pathways reconnected, and he died of a crack cocaine addiction at the age of 41. My youngest brother, who had horrible traumatic brain injury, and it caused him to be the kind of person that I don't believe he wanted to be. He had a lot of mental illness issues, and my family was a family of great mental illness problems. And I could digress and just tell so many stories there, but I will say this about my youngest brother. That path led him to one of the most horrific ends that a person could possibly have, and that is he died of AIDS at the age of 35. My healthy youngest brother went from 160 pounds to less than 70 pounds. And I watched him at the end of his life literally wither away. I watched him at the end of his life perish. And hey, no one should perish. No one should perish. So if you take all those things and you put them all together, in 1995, I was so depressed about my youngest brother's death to AIDS at the age of 35 that it was my blessed wife. She knew it. And she said, you always talked about getting your doctorate. You love school. Why don't you go back to school and get your doctorate degree? So I did. And at the age of 45, this old guy that was illiterate in college, are you ready? You might not want to talk to me after I say this, whose SAT score was 890 combined. No college would accept that today. Thank God for sports, right? I had sports, got me into college. Somewhere between freshman and senior year, I quit sports and I became an academic. Learned to read, learned to write, learned to study, studied hard. Somewhere in graduate school, I became smart. And at the age of 45, with a wife and 3 kids, something happened to this old boy. I was really smart. And I got into doctoral study, and I basically went into doctoral study to understand something that people have studied from the beginning of existence: suffering. Why so much suffering? I don't get it. I don't get it. You know, the suffering in the history of this world is so immense that we can't even stand to look at it. You know what we do? We look at little sound bites of it every night on the evening news, don't we? And it somehow jades us and hardens us, where it no longer becomes horrific, it becomes acceptable to us.
It becomes normalized. We've learned to normalize all the violence that exists around the world.
And we learn to live with it, don't we?
Yes.
And all of a sudden, war seems necessary. Genocide seems like a good idea. We look at the death of one person as though, so what? There's 7.5 billion people on this earth.
Right, like when people say, well, people die every day. Guys, but as we're listening to the story and you're thinking like, wow, like you suffered a lot. I want you to notice this and think, if you yourself are suffering right now, you've been through a lot. I don't want to say exactly what you've gone through. This man is evidence of the progression of mankind or humankind when there is purpose, or when they find purpose and they continue to grow and have a growth mindset. I mean, he got into college through sports and he didn't even know how to read, right? But then some guy,
don't tell anybody,
teaches him how to read, and then he decides to kind of take on his different path, his different role. And for me, that's just an amazing story that basically should tell everybody, like, it doesn't matter how deep you are in the hole, there is hope.
Yes.
There is hope.
I like it.
But I think the hard part is seeing the light in the hole, understanding that there's hope. Maybe that guy was your angel, right? Where is somebody else's angel, right? Or that's my biggest fear, is that some people have turned so negative that even if the angel comes around, they block them out, right? Screw you, I don't care anymore, life sucks, look at it, you know, everybody hates me, my mom is not in my life, my dad's not in my life. And so, you know, I'm very inspired, man. I'm very inspired by the fact that you've lived your life and you're still living your life.
I feel like I should be interviewing you.
I mean, one day people interview me, but I mean, the point is that there's a lot of sad people, there's a lot of suffering people, and it hurts. It hurts to live around people like this. It hurts to work with kids like this.
Oh my word.
But you know how it is, man. Like, I'm a teacher. I teach in Watts, and you know, this is a city, a town that has generationally suffered.
Absolutely.
And so now we get all these kids that are just kind of getting passed on the same suffering traits of their parents.
Yes.
That they sometimes, hopefully not, will pass down to their kids as well.
Yes.
And you know, they're being taught by suffering teachers. You know what I mean? So it kind of becomes like this cycle of pain and misery.
Yeah.
But I try my best, man. I try my best to be happy. I try my best to just put a smile on my face even when I feel anxious, right?
Yeah.
And
you got a good one too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you know,
it could light up a room.
Yeah, and the kids will tell you. They'll let you know when you feel bad. They'll let you know when you feel good. And I like the whole teacher talk and saying, like, being a teacher is one of the most noble professions that one can engage with. Unfortunately, I feel like society doesn't really appreciate teachers as a whole. I wish it did a better job of doing so.
Yeah.
There would probably be less of a retention rate amongst teachers. But, you know, it was very evident right from the onslaught that teaching was not going to be about the money. It was going to be about the experience.
Yeah.
And you know what? I was listening to
and it shouldn't be.
Right.
And it shouldn't be. Because if you're trying to teach kids that their life has value and worth, then you shouldn't put a price tag on it. If you
That's true. You can't buy happiness.
If you want to teach a kid that they are priceless, then you don't put a price tag on it, because it's priceless. And see, that's the thing that compassion teaches, is that life is priceless and that everybody has value and worth. Everybody has dignity. That's the thing that compassion teaches. And so what happened in my dissertation was I started out studying suffering, And I was at Azusa Pacific University, and the chair of my dissertation committee told me I did not have enough background in the study of suffering in order to study compassion. And so she assigned me to the Dean of Theology at Azusa, one of the most brilliant men I've ever met in my life, Dr. Gail Beebe. Dr. Beebe today is president of Westmont College up in Montecito, up on the coast. Yeah, I think he's got a pretty good assignment there. Most brilliant man I've ever met. And
brilliant in what sense? In the intellectual way or in the soulful kind of way?
Well, I asked him about it one day, and so I'm going to make a religious statement. So
sure, that's
forgive
fine.
me. It's okay.
Don't care.
Because I don't want to. I don't want to proselytize using your podcast to proselytize.
I get you.
I just want to share my story.
Fine.
So this is just my
You're
feeling.
on here for a reason.
So my dissertation chair, Dr. Lillian Waymire, God rest her soul, I chose her as my chair. Guess why? Because she had a PhD from Cal Berkeley
Wow.
in journalism and library science. I was illiterate.
Right.
I was a horrible writer. I chose her because I wanted her to help me be a good writer. Because someday I want to write. Someday, because books are so valuable, someday I want to write. Because truly, watching this podcast, it's powerful. You'll hear the words. You'll see the two handsome guys sitting here, right? But you know what? If you and I, if we put this interview in print and got it out there, it would do even more good because reading is more interactive than viewing. Reading takes more of your body's skills. It's more interactive. It's more engaging, and so books will never go out of fashion for learning. And so I really honor that. I want to write a book someday. In fact, he put this here. That's the title of the book I want to write. The Road to Coventry. Oh, we'd have to talk hours to unpack that. So
Okay, we'll leave that for next episode.
Leave that for next time. But what I really want to do is I like your statement about that teachers don't get paid much. And rightfully so. What difference does it make? Teachers should make a livable wage. That's the point.
For sure.
A livable wage.
You cannot argue against that.
No, and the reason why is because teachers need to live. They need a place, they need to eat. They need a shelter. Teachers need transportation, right? Teachers need books. Lots of them, right? So you need a livable wage. But do you need to make millions being a teacher? No. Because then people would do it for the money. But teaching is so valuable, it's priceless. That connecting, that speaking into the identity, that is so priceless you can't put a price tag on it. What you're doing right here, Jesus, is priceless. It's priceless. I hope your podcast goes viral. You know why? Not to make a lot of money, not for you to make a lot, not for me to make a lot of money. I hope it goes priceless to make people learn that they are priceless. Because you cannot value others until you value yourself. And that's the big problem out there. The big problem is demoralization. And what is demoralization? We were made to be somebody. We were made to have purpose. And this is probably the biggest one. Even at 65, I'm still learning this. We were made to be necessary. Sometimes I don't feel necessary. You know the biggest thing you did for me? You asked me to be on your podcast. Guess how that made me feel?
Special.
It made me feel necessary. You know why? Nobody could do the Dr. Green interview except
Dr. Green.
Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's 100% right.
One of my favorite theologians, the great Dr. Seuss.
What did he say?
He wrote in his book, Happy Birthday to Me. He said, Happy birthday. There's no one on earth who is, I love this expression, here's your bumper sticker. There's no one on earth who is youer than you.
Man, I love Dr. Seuss.
You're it. There's no other Jesus Flores. He's sitting right here. You have value, you have worth, you have purpose, you have dignity. Your life has meaning. And that's kind of the point. As much as you believe that about yourself, that's the extent that you can give it to your students. A student is no greater than their teacher. And so that point about the greatest thing a teacher can do is get healthy yourself. Thrive. Be the best you can be. Because that's what you give your students every day. You can't give them more than you are. I've learned a lot about the brain. I've learned a lot about learning theory. I've learned a lot about cognition. And one thing I know for sure, you only know what you know. Tell me something you don't know. Oh, he can't. He can't. He can't.
Got him.
He can't tell me something he doesn't know. Why? Because you only know what you know. Does that make education valuable? Get outside the box you're in. Get outside the prison of your mind. Start thinking about your teachers. When you go into class, wouldn't this be a weird thought? Maybe they have something to offer me that I don't know. That's outside of my box of knowing. And by the way, here's a good one. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Oh, to be free. Oh, to have these chains fall off. And there are things in life that are chains, they're a prison. One is the box that we're in, right? It's a prison.
Right.
I'm a prisoner to what I know. And therefore, I got to get outside of what I know. Experience, right?
Right.
I have to, it's a big world out there. A lot of your students are a lot like me. I haven't seen much of the world. I've seen a lot of LA County. People ask me all the time, hey, have you been here, there, and the No. I'm a native Angelino. Go Doyers. I love the Dodgers. I've been going to the Dodgers since the stadium opened.
Right.
I love the Dodgers. But you know what? I've also experienced Little League. I've also experienced Little League World Series. I've experienced college baseball. I like to take the gold line to the blue line to the Expo line so that I can get down there by USC and go see the Trojans play college baseball. You know why? Because someday I'm going to Omaha, Nebraska, wherever that is, and I'm going to watch the College World Series. If you're going to love baseball, you might as well get exposed to all of baseball.
Which makes me think, if you're going to love humanity, you might as well be exposed to everybody.
That's a better bumper sticker than me. Look at you. You are doing great bumper stickers.
One day when I'm because maybe I don't know if I'm gonna be teaching high school for too long.
Yeah.
I'm saying like wherever my heart feels like it's that point, that's where I'll stop.
Wow.
But maybe I'll get into the professoring life, and I could do a couple like I would love to just do podcasts and just meet people from all over the world, and because I am a teacher. I'm a teacher at heart.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily have to be teaching in a classroom, right?
You want to switch seats right now? You could be the professor, and I'll be your student.
I've noticed that podcasts, although you said it's not as engaging as reading, it's still engaging.
It is engaging
by using the technological methods of today, right? Which is YouTube.
Yeah.
And all it takes is just one video for people to find out who I am, who you are. And so my idea is that I'm working really hard on this, and little by little, more people are kind of getting on board and getting to know who I am and doing all these different things. And I don't do it because I want fame. I do it because I want people to learn.
I know.
You know what I'm saying? And if it just so happens that fame comes with it and money comes with it, then
Yeah.
that's just God's blessings.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna use that same money to help the community.
I know you are.
You know what I mean? The family and stuff like
I
that.
know you are.
So, you know, that's where I'm coming from, and I'm just praying on it. I'm working on it, and you know, whatever happens, and it'll be for the best.
Yeah, and by the way, I didn't mean to put down podcasts in any way.
Oh, I know you didn't.
What I want you to know is your podcast has great value, and it's certainly way more valuable than if you did nothing.
For
Right.
sure.
You're
for
doing
sure.
you're doing something, young
Yeah.
man. And that's one of the constructs of compassion, is that you can't just know something, you can't just feel something, you can't even just be something. You have to do something. You have to take action on behalf of those who suffer. Otherwise, it's not compassion. That's what separates compassion from pity, sympathy, even empathy, is I can pity someone and never lift a finger to help them. I can sympathize, oh, I feel so bad, and never offer a sandwich to someone who's hungry. I can empathize. I could totally put myself in your place and never do one thing to help you get into rehab or eliminate your drug habit or something, right? But I can't do any of those things and be compassionate. Because the thing about compassion is it always takes action on behalf of the one who is suffering. You see? So I can't just pull up to the corner and see the homeless person with the cardboard sign and just turn the radio up higher so I don't have to look and I don't have to see. I cannot just think to myself, oh look, I've got half an egg McMuffin right here, you know, and we'll give him a half an egg McMuffin. I can't just do something like that. I can't just sit, I can't roll my window down, get a job, right? No, the compassionate soul sees the need and responds to the need. When sometimes that takes a lot of effort on behalf of the one who's trying to apply compassion to the suffering around them in order to be an agent of, religious term, redemption. You know what that term, I love that term. I wish we didn't eliminate it from our culture because it's religious. To redeem something means to restore its value. Restore its value. You see, when you apply compassion, when someone suffers, like my journey, what happened when I was 45 years old? My whole life journey led to a man who never smiled, who lost his smile, who was depressed, who was broken, who saw the world as a horrific place, right? I was suffering. What happened? Compassion was applied to my suffering. And when you suffer, you lose your value and worth in life. Suffering can steal all your value and worth. Suffering could put a price tag on your life. What happens in our culture that just we get hardened to? Somebody gets, is this on camera? Look at those shoes. Look at those. Oh, be careful. How much those shoes cost?
Honestly, about $80.
Could you believe, can anyone sitting here believe that somebody would take Jesus Flores' life over an $80 pair of tennis shoes? Do you see what that person did? In their suffering, they put a price tag, a value on your life, and took your shoes, $80.
Right.
I heard on the news once, you talk about something that'll just jade you, that'll make you harden to this world.
Right.
A kid was killed for his baseball cap. A kid was killed to take his baseball cap. These things, people kill people for cell phones. What does that do? It puts a value on that person's life. That's way too low, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely.
Jesus, are you worth more than $80?
I hope so.
I think you are, brother.
Right.
But see, you got to feel that way about yourself too. Because we can become so demoralized. Suffering can get us to a point where, like, we feel so bad about ourselves, right? That we think our life is worthless. Oh, listen, When you think your life is worthless, you could do a lot of damage.
I see that, and I want to connect that to a point. In indigenous culture, there's a saying, "In like etch," which basically says, "You are my other me. You are the reflection of who I am."
Yeah.
And when you are worthless, or you feel worthless, everything around you is worthless.
Yes.
Because you see yourself in others.
Yes.
But when you are full of love, then you love everybody around you.
That's it. Yeah.
Because you see yourself in everybody.
Oh man.
Well,
I couldn't be a happier teacher because the student is teaching the teacher. I like your style, young man.
thank you, Dr. Green. Is there anywhere where people can reach out to you if they feel compelled to do so?
Yeah.
Maybe like an email or something?
Oh yeah, I like to respond to emails, and I'm happy to do it. As a matter of fact, Jesus came over here today and I gave him a present, and I would give all of you this present. Number one, these are some of the lectures that I developed from my dissertation. And the story there was, I went to study suffering and I ended up studying compassion. I ended up studying compassion, and that became so fruitful because I found there was nothing positive to be gained by trying to understand why there's so much suffering. I'm sorry, but when you go that path, you know that ever since the beginning of time, humans have tried to study why is there so much suffering, and no one has ever come up with a good answer. As a matter of fact, the only ones that will tell you they know why there's so much suffering, they're trying to sell you something. Be very careful. I found that there was a way better. Sometimes when you can't answer a question, maybe it's because we need a better question. So instead of asking why there's so much suffering, I started asking, what can I do about it?
I love that.
Do you like that?
Yes.
I went from why to what? I went from why there's so much suffering to what can I do about it? And that's what led me to my study of compassion. Compassion is the trait that we apply to suffering in order to be an agent of redemption. Suffering causes people to lose their value and worth. You apply compassion to it, justice for those who have known no justice, care for those who have never been cared for. I like your term love. Love for those who have never been loved. Right? And what does the application of compassion do? It restores the value of that person. It redeems them. We use a term, and by the way, I'll just use them synonymously. In education, we like the term resiliency. I would say that resiliency and redemption, those are synonymous. So if you don't like the term redemption, it's all semantical, right?
Yes.
Just use
Semantics.
just use the term resiliency. We were meant to be resilient. We were born good. We were born somebody. We were born with purpose. We were born necessary. And the suffering of this world can rob us of all of that. Somebody, a teacher like this guy right here, comes along and applies compassion to that suffering, and that student becomes resilient. It restores who they were meant to be. Yeah.
Well, that's a beautiful way to kind of bring down what compassion is in action. And thank you so much, Dr. Green, for allowing me into your lovely space today. It's completely an honor. This is how I know that I'm doing what I love to do. And
It really shows.
one last thing.
Sure.
Your email for people to.
Oh, sure. Yeah, if you want to email Dr. Green, I'm a full-time professor at Azusa Pacific University, where I direct the Masters of Special Education there. So, and then my passion is teaching teachers. So I don't tell them, but I moonlight down at the LA County Office of Ed. And why do I do that? not for the money. I do it to meet great people like Jesus Flores.
Well, thank you so much.
And emails coming.
Yes.
My wife today, when we talked about this interview, she said, answer the questions. She's like, G Green, GGREEN @apu.edu. You send me an email, I will connect with you. If you would like a copy of this, I don't know if you can make it available on your podcast, but this CDs are kind of obsolete now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. So what I've done is I've actually uploaded the lectures onto YouTube, and I could give you the YouTube address too if you're interested.
Just say it right now. What can people type in?
Do you think I have YouTube addresses memorized?
Maybe you could just type in Dr. Green into YouTube.
Oh, that's a good try. Actually, I've put these lectures on some classes and made them only available to my classes. But maybe you could help me make them available on YouTube. Because I'm technologically challenged a little. I'm a digital immigrant.
That's fine.
I'm not a native.
Awesome.
So
thank you so much, Dr. Green.
Oh, are you kidding?
This was super dope. I had a blast.
Was it okay?
Guys, I'm Jay Flo, and I will catch you guys next time on the next episode.